And we are back. First Strike is back on VSiN for the first time in 2022. I am Dave Ross. We've got a great hour before you make any wagers on UFC Fight Night between Calvin Kattar and Giga Chikadze. For the next hour, Nick Kalikas is going to join us here momentarily. Lou Finocchiaro, Jordan Sherwood, and Reed Kuhn to get you all the updated numbers before you make those wagers here at UFC Apex in Las Vegas. But we have had a 3-week hiatus. And I know that's a long time for MMA fans like myself, but we are back, and what a banger of a main event this one should be between Kattar and Chikadze. Obviously, these guys are fast trackers in the 145-pound division. Right now, we've seen Giga as big as a minus 240, minus 235 favorite we're seeing right now via DraftKings. This line has actually gone up. But I am here at Circa Sportsbook, and the man that actually sets the numbers behind me is right next to me right now. Nick Kalikas, always a pleasure to have you back on. Happy New Year for the first time as we get to talk MMA here in 2022. It is interesting because I know fight fans like myself, they're starved, they can't wait, and now we finally have it back. What did you see from the MMA community in the last 3 weeks when you posted those numbers for this fight? Were they just chomping at the bit to get back and wager?
Not quite. I mean, because we've had him up for a couple weeks, obviously, like you said. So, but now we're starting to see that action trickle, and everybody's kind of itching to get back, like you said. So it's awesome, man. I'll tell you what, 3-4 weeks without UFC is tough.
It is tough.
Yeah.
And so, Nick, I know when you put those numbers up, and obviously Giga Chikadze right now does feel like the fast riser. It wasn't that long ago that Calvin Kattar had the same type of pedigree. We thought, hey, this guy's on the come up. And of course, Max Holloway happens. It's Max Holloway. We understand it. But he is a sizable dog here for the Boston stopper, Boston finisher here in Calvin Kattar against the guy known for his kicks in Giga Chikadze. Have you seen any movement on the underdog in Kattar of this? Is this all one-way Giga action right now?
So far, it's been mostly Giga action for sure. I mean, the line opened, I think, market wide around minus 170, minus 175. And then it got bet up right away. I opened it around minus 210, minus 215 at Circa, and we immediately got sharp action. So I had to move the line, adjust it. I think it's minus 240 for us right now as it sits. So yeah, and it's been steady. So we're not seeing a ton of action on the dog Kattar, but I expect the money will come in at some point. He's a great fighter, like you said. I mean, he made it all the way towards Max Holloway. If you make it to Max Holloway and get to fight Max Holloway, that says a lot. So
and again, because this is a big step up for Chikadze. I mean, let's be honest about that. He's been looking for top 5, top 10 guys. Now he's going to get it in Calvin Kattar to put him in at that big a favorite and to see get bet up. I wonder if there's a little bit of caution there, but we do know that he's got a flashy style. Right. The over-unders in this one was very interesting to me, and it felt like when it came out at 2.5, and I believe it was about minus 150 initially, that got bet up very quickly as well. So I think people are expecting a fight script of Chikadze, but not necessarily early, possibly getting Kattar later.
Well, I think originally some of the books out there posted 4.5 rounds, believe it or not. Then it was 3.5 rounds. So it started getting bet down. But by the time the market most of the market kind of caught up and posted the line, it was around 2.5, like you said. And then, so that's where you saw some action come back in on the over. Because obviously, if it got bet down by the smaller bettors early on, then the limits got increased a little bit. So then some of the sharper bettors are betting it over, like you just said.
Talking, of course, with Nick Kalikas, who sets the lines here at Circa Sportsbook, also does a great job at VFC on the line on UFC Fight Pass. So check that out as well. We'll get to that in a second. Are you seeing combinations now where people, if they don't want to lay the big number here in Chikadze at, say, minus 235, are they looking for those scenarios where they say, all right, I'll take Giga and the over in the rounds to try to get better bang for the buck?
Yeah, we can see some of that for sure. I mean, props, again, when a line is to a certain point and a lot of people can't find true value at minus 245, they look for the props or, like you said, a parlay, or you could just bet the total. If you think this fight, I mean, both these guys are so durable, I think we are going to continue to see some sharp action on the over.
And again, fight to go the distance right now, you're getting plus value there at plus 130. So again, if most of the people are betting it to the over, that's why it's juiced right now at minus 175 at 2.5 rounds. There might be some value there if you want to go for a fighter and a decision and getting that win in the decision, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, I think Giga is kind of the wild card here because, I mean, his finishing, especially his finishing ability towards the body, like, you know, when he gets that Giga kick going as well. So I think a lot of people will start betting the under as well. So I don't see this line kind of flying too far over. But like you said, the fight actually to go to the distance, if you're getting plus money, you might want to target that.
Yeah, and again, when you look at Chikadze here, who is right now a climber, we're thinking possibly if he looks good against Calvin Kattar, which is tough to do, that it could be in line for a title shot. Name recognition always goes a long way. I know when you set those numbers and the way you see outside of the sharps, that money coming in. Are they coming in even though maybe Kattar could be the better, well-known American fighter, but Chikadze globally, I think that name's starting to resonate.
Absolutely. I mean, and then you look at his last few performances. I mean, beating Cub Swanson like he did, and then beating Barboza like he did. I mean, that goes a long way. So I think that's fresh in people's mind. And Barboza, his stock rose so greatly because of that win. I mean, Barboza historically is one of the best strikers we've seen in the sport. I mean, he's so good. So to go out there and beat him at his own game, so to speak, was just phenomenal. So I think the hype is at an all-time high right now for Chikadze.
It really is. So let's see if he can get it done. I watched the stare down today, Nick, and I got scared just watching these guys. Nobody broke eyes in that stare down. Let's talk about a couple of heavyweights here, and I wonder if you're getting any action here on Chase Sherman against Jake Collier. A small line here, a small favorite here for Collier. Sherman is maybe the more well-known fighter in this one. Are you seeing any money come in on this fight yet?
Collier is the popular side. Yeah, Collier's starting to get the action. A lot of people believe that. I think he's a little bit more consistent at this point. I mean, if you look at Sherman, he's kind of been up and down in his performances too, not just his record in the UFC, right? So even in the last fight, I think both these guys showed kind of a little bit of weakness, meaning it seemed like they didn't want to be there, so to speak. But I think you get more consistency with Collier, so I think that's why the people are coming in. They trust him a little bit more, and the line's kind of going his way.
And as we talk now, Nick, and we're about 24 hours before this card begins here, will you see more late action, though? Or are we starting to see it trickle in? As you said, it's coming in early now on Collier. Will that trend continue, do you think, in the next 24 hours?
We'll see. I know there's going to be buyback on Sherman for sure because it is a heavyweight fight, of course, as we know. And these are kind of the same tier heavyweights as well, right? So I don't think it's one side's going to pull all that far off. If it does climb up to 150, 160, I guarantee there's going to be some buyback. There's going to be some scalpers that come back in and just get off it and just make a definite profit, right? Exactly.
And with heavyweights, you just never know because it just takes one. So maybe you will see some of that money come back on Sherman. Let's go down to what should be a very exciting fight here whenever you have Brandon Royval stepping into the octagon here. Small favorite against Rogerio Bontorin right now. Royval at minus 160. Any movement on this number since you posted it?
Yeah, I mean, for us, we posted it about where it's sitting right now, so it's been steady, and we've been getting two-way action on it. It hasn't been that crazy, but I think market-wide, it did open around minus 110 a pick'em. So early on, all the smaller bettors came in and pounced and raised that line to where it is right now, too. So a lot of times in the bigger markets, we see a lot of these sharps making fake moves. So early on, when the limits are low, they'll come in and bet one side, and then when the limits get increased, they'll come in and fire on the dog the other way with a bigger, margin for victory for them and bigger profit. But I don't think that's the case here. I honestly think that people realized that Royval was probably set a little low, so they came in on that side.
And we know next week, obviously, at UFC 270, we're going to have the title fight there. Maybe one of these two guys here at 125 pounds, we're looking for new blood with Moreno and Figueiredo. Maybe the winner here, if they're impressive, that can last in Dana White's eyes as they try to get new blood there at the 125-pound title limit. All right, let's talk about Katlyn Chookagian against Jennifer Maia, because Maia right now, a sizable underdog here, about plus 155 is what I'm seeing here. This is a rematch between these two ladies. What have you seen here market-wide so far?
I mean, people are betting this fight like Chookagian won again already. So, I mean, because she has that win in the first fight, it was a unanimous decision. She deserved to win that first matchup. I think people are just thinking, okay, it's going to be a similar fight. It was similar priced. I mean, now we're starting to see a little bit higher than it was the first time around. It's around minus 160-ish, I believe. Now it's like minus 180, 190 in some places as well. So people are coming in on Chookagian. They're taking her to win by decision as well. So I don't know, man. I think that it's going to be a competitive fight. We know that for sure, right?
It is interesting because in a close first fight, right, everybody's just going to, Chookagian's going to win again. And I know rematches tend to go that way a lot of times, where the result doesn't change. But that was a very close fight. To your point there. I do want to talk about a couple other fights here and maybe some other ways here very quickly. Minus 360 to go the distance in this was. So again, nobody thinks there's going to be a stoppage inside of 3 rounds here, right?
That's correct. And I doubt there will be. I mean, especially on the Chookagian side, it's not like she goes out there and finishes everybody she fights. So I think if she wins a fight, it's more than likely obviously going to be on the scorecards. And you have to lean that way for Maia as well. But if there's going to be a finish in this fight, I think it's probably on Maia's end out of the two, right? I mean, she's got a little bit more power. Yeah. And I think, she has that ability to submit you when she's on the ground. Not that Chookagian doesn't. She actually has a very underrated submission game. She just doesn't use it a lot, right? So I think they will neutralize each other out, and there's probably not going to be a finish.
All right, so again, minus 400 if you want to take that over for 2.5 rounds. So again, people out here in Sin City expecting this one to possibly go the distance. I mentioned some of the other names on this card, Nick, that I think just from fight fans like me, I go, what year is this? Court McKee's still out there fighting, and he's minus 105 right now in his fight. When you get a guy like Court McKee, very popular, we've known him for over a decade here in the UFC. Again, do you see that money come in on him because he's the more well-known fighter than his opposition in this one?
It's the age, I think, that's kind of keeping bettors away from him a little bit. I mean, he hasn't looked that bad. You know, he's been a great underrated fighter in the UFC. I mean, the guy has it all. He's hard to take down. He's got decent striking. He's got that fight IQ. He's got the ability to kind of take over and control fights. And he's a sleeper in the division. He's always been, but he's 37 years old, and he's facing a young gun that's coming in, obviously hungry and trying to find his way into the UFC. So more action is coming in on Brihimai, and it's actually some sharp action that we're seeing hit that side as well. So it's not just square action. So the young fighter is getting the action right now.
You know, it's so funny because the first fights that we mentioned, all of them basically identical in age. And then you get to this fight and you see where that disparaging age difference takes place here. And you can understand why that money is coming in on the much younger fighter.
Yep.
I mentioned some popular fighters. I don't know that they get much more popular than Boom Kelleher, just his style of fight that when Brian's out there, he's looking for a finish. He's looking for a stoppage. He's looking for a knockout. He's heavily favored to do so here, minus 310 against Kevin Kroom. Is this, again, where guys like to watch him, certainly during the pandemic? It seemed like he was fighting every card there for a while. Any money coming in on Kroom, or is this all one-way action?
Now, it's been more action towards the favorite, like you said, and Kelleher here. I mean, Kroom is stepping in on very short notice, too, right? He's a replacement. I did reach out to James Cross's coach, and James Cross did tell me that he's always training. Kroom's always in the camp, and he was actually expecting a short notice fight. So I don't think he's going to be that far off shape, and it should be a pretty competitive fight. It's very difficult to bet it where the line is right now, but Kelleher is the rightful favorite, and like I said, we're going to see more parlay action continue to come in that way.
Got about 30 seconds to go. I mentioned UFC on the line here, UFC Fight Pass. Tell people what they're going to get here when they watch.
Especially when you touched on the Roy Val-Bontarine fight, you guys have to tune in to UFC Fight Pass and just check that out, because between Yanni and I, it was a little bit of fireworks. So this is one of the funnest episodes that we've had for sure.
Okay, got to check them out. UFC Fight Pass, UFC on the line. Nick Kalikas, it's just good to be back and good to be talking fights with you. When we come back, Lou Finocchiaro is going to join us as well. Don't go anywhere. It's First Strike right here on VSiN, the Sports Betting Network. DraftKings Sportsbook is giving you plenty of ways to bet on the UFC. Just download the DraftKings Sportsbook app, and you're going to be able to bet on more ways than just the main event. DraftKings has great odds on fight lines, total rounds, and futures for MMA events. Eligibility restrictions do apply. See DraftKings.com/sportsbook for full terms and conditions. Back here on First Strike on VSiN, I am Dave Ross, and it is always a pleasure to have Lou Finocchiaro join the program. Follow him on Twitter @GamBlue. And you got to check out his BOUT Business podcast, breaking down everything going on in the world of MMA. Lou, great to talk to you again, because I feel like after 3 weeks, it's just too long to not talk fights. Before we get into these fights here on Saturday night, tell them what they're going to get when they tune into the BOUT Business podcast.
Well, Dave, first of all, thanks for having me on. This is a really excellent show. Good perspective from a couple different great handicappers. And then the voice of MMA, Nick Kalikas, and you do a great job distributing, Dave. The BOUT Business podcast simply is 15 to 17 minutes of my final UFC releases each week. It drops sometime Friday afternoon so that people can tune in, listen for 15 minutes, and then decide what they want to do, if anything, with regard to the fights the next day.
Absolutely. And I know that when we were talking about this fight in particular, when you look at the main event here in Calvin Kattar and Giga Chikadze, you and I spoke about this almost, I'd say, a month ago here as we were waiting to get some action after this 3-week delay. And we just had Nick on. And to your point, Lou, when you saw the numbers that he put out initially, and again, he mentioned the over-under in rounds, he had to almost get it down to 2.5 because it started off 4.5, 3.5. He had to get it down to 2.5. And at 2.5, it's really been bet up. So right now we're looking at somewhere north about 170, minus 170, minus 175 to take the over in this fight at 2.5. Do you like that side, or do you like a straight up total here with Giga, even though he's a big favorite right now, over $2?
Well, I think that Giga should be favored in this fight, but I think 235 is reflective of too much bias on his side based on his success against Cub Swanson and Barbosa. And it's also, I think, a detriment to Kattar because of his result with Max Holloway a year ago. But Kattar's been off a year, and Giga's in with a really durable guy. And the last real durable, thick kind of a fight he had was about 4 fights ago, and it was a decision. And so I think Kattar is being a little over undervalued. More importantly, Dave, I think that total of 2.5, I think that number was inviting to go over at 175. I still think it's inviting to go over. And really, if you look in the marketplace, a lot of folks have changed this total to 3.5. So I think if you can still get that 2.5, even though you got to pay a little bit more than when we released it early in or late in December, I still think 2.5 minus 170, 175 is a good price. It's not giving Kattar the credit for his durability.
It's an excellent point, Lou, and I do want to stay on that fight script for those people that are going, wait a minute, they're double dog daring me to take the under in this 2.5. Kattar has been off for that year, right? We know Chikadze, those kicks can come from anywhere, but he might try to feel out the stronger opponent here in Calvin Kattar and try to avoid those right hands. Is that why the over, even though it's juiced here at minus 175, still is the right side to be on because you just can't see a firefight in those first 5 minutes as they try to feel each other out?
I think if there is a firefight, it's Kattar. Kattar's a guy that puts out 5 significant strikes a minute, takes 8, which shows you that he's coming forward and he's making the fight. Giga, on the other hand, he lands 3.7, takes 2.7. Giga wants space, room. He wants to move around and make it precision and really quickness and speed, skill. That's Giga. And the issue with Kattar is when he fought Moicano, a long, skinny, tall, rangy, quick guy, and when he fought Holloway, the same kind of fighter, he got beat. And that's what Giga is. And that's why I'm willing to give Giga the favorite position. I just don't think 2.5 is reflective of Kattar's ability. And further, Dave, I think when this fight maybe gets to round 3 and round 4, I think Giga has a chance to chop Kattar down in those later rounds. That said, I also feel that the slighter, thinner man Giga could wear down in the championship rounds to Kattar's pressure, and Kattar could in turn get him out. It's really a compelling bout.
Well, that's interesting because, again, there is plus money for the fight to go to the decision here, plus 130. But, and I know you're always really good at this, Lou, is you find the best value possibly depending on the outcome that you think is the most likely to happen. Depending on which side you might be on, if you like Chikadze, but the fight not to go the distance, that's plus 120 just for Giga to win inside the decision. So if you don't want to lay that big number of minus 235, minus 240 that we're seeing, might that be a better value play if you want to back Chikadze, but not to go the distance?
It is if you're wise enough to know whether Chikadze is going to finish him or whether this goes to a decision. And that gets tricky. And I know the value is enhanced. To me, what I believe that I'll set my foundation for this whole fight card on is over 2.5.
Okay, I'm with you on that play as well because I listened to you about 4 weeks ago on that. Lou, let's talk about when you have a rematch here in Caitlin Chikadze against Jennifer Maia here. What's interesting to me, and Nick Kalikas and I just touched upon that a little bit, all the money seems to be coming in on Chikadze again. Now, again, she won the first time out, but it was a close fight here between these two women, and now, as Nick said, the number just keeps going up, up, up. She's minus 180. Are people forgetting who Jennifer Maia might be? Is this a live dog scenario?
I really believe it is, Dave. When they fought the first time a couple years ago, Maia closed plus 120. And while Chikadze was able to keep her at distance and pitter-pat her way to a decision, it was Maia that had an advantage at top control. And so we know Chikadze's fight game is going to be to maintain distance and try and keep Maia on the outside with long kicks and jabs. What is Maia going to do different this fight than last? I don't know, but I do like the fact that she's coming off Valentina and a fight with Jessica Ai, two capable girls, and really what I think the especially Ai fight showed us was that Maia's a pretty mean gal. And with that Brazilian jiu-jitsu, if she can find a way to control Chikadze and get her on the ground, Chikadze only has 52% takedown defense. I think there's a path for Maia here. Further, Maia plus 155 not only represents value, the over in this fight is 2.5 over minus 400. Maia via decision plus 240. Don't forget to use some of that.
See, that's the smartest way to handicap. Instead of laying the minus 400 to go over 2.5 rounds, couple that, as Lou just did here, with a pathway to victory for Jennifer Maia, and then you're getting plus money here at plus 240. What's interesting here is you look at it inside the decision for either fighter, right? If you just thought that somebody's going to get the stoppage of somebody, you could play it technically both sides. As long as the fight didn't go to the decision, you're going to win money. Plus 500 for Chikadze, plus 600 for Jennifer Maia. Is that just taking a shot in the dark to say, all right, inside of 3 rounds, somebody's going to get the stoppage. I'm just not sure who.
I would do that in the heavyweight fight, maybe in the co-main event. But when there's a total that's 2.5 over 400, they're telling you it's going to decision. And Chikadze fights to decision, and so has Maia. So I don't think that would be something that I could risk, Dave. I would just as soon try and decide which of the 2 women is going to win, take them by decision, and convert that to more advantage.
All right, got about another minute to go here with Lou Finocchiaro. And Lou, when you look at the card here, and there are some interesting names on it, even in the prelims, when you see somebody like Court McGee or Brian Boom Kelleher on this prelim card, is there any fight outside of the main event and possibly the co-main event that really grabs your attention?
Well, I'm trying to stay away from these undercard fights because there's been some shuffling. But Kelleher is a guy that's really challenged as far as height. He's got a good fight game, doesn't win all his fights, but he gets a short notice opponent in a guy named Kevin Kroom that's going to be 5 inches taller, a little bit younger, and have a 7-inch reach advantage over him. The thing with Kroom is playing with 48 out of 52 cards. He ain't all there. And I do regard him, based on his grappling acumen, as a challenge for Kelleher. I just don't think he has the skill on the feet to use his length and reach, but at plus, 250 or 300, he might be a flyer.
Okay, and very quickly, because I always love to get your insight on this. I know how closely you watch these weigh-ins and sometimes these stare-downs. I watched the one with Chikadze and Kattar today in the main event, and neither guy broke eyes with the other after they were separated. It was almost like who's going to blink first. Did you glean anything into that stare down today?
I gleaned 2 world-class 145-pound fighters that are going to go in there and take longer than 12 and a half minutes to decide their fight.
Love it. Lou Finocchiaro, always appreciate the time. Follow him on Twitter @Gamblou and check out the BOUT Business Podcast. Just getting it cranked up. Much more to get to on First Strike. When we come back, Jordan Sherwood's going to join the program. Come on back. It is First Strike on VSiN, the Sports Betting Network. Back here on First Strike on VSiN. I'm your host, Dave Ross. It's always a pleasure to be joined by Chicago's finest, Jordan Sherwood. You can follow him on Twitter, as I do, @Woodon1063. Does a great job at ESPN Chicago. Jordan, Happy New Year. You guys are the last people I can say this to because we've been off for 3 weeks, but the UFC is back, so therefore so are we. Let's get right to the big boys and to the heavyweights in this one. When you look at Sherman against Collier here, and right now Jay Collier has been taking some of the money, but I think you think Chase Sherman might be a live dog in this one.
Yeah, I'm actually surprised that Jay Collier has continued to get the money. Look, this guy is an inflated middleweight. I mean, that's what he used to fight at. Now he fights at 265, and he hasn't looked good. Maybe he looked okay against Carlos Felipe, but he beat John Vellante. But everybody's really basically doing that. And Chase Sherman is a bad matchup for him, a guy that's going to stand in there in the pocket and trade with him. Hits hard, can take a lot of damage as well. And look, yes, I get it. Chase Sherman is 1-5 in his 6 fights, but he's a banger. He keeps coming. Good cardio for a heavyweight. So, yeah, I think money is certainly worth being invested on Chase Sherman as a live dog against Jake Collier.
And Jordan, to that point, do you think that Sherman might extend this fight? It's only a 3-round fight, obviously. But could this go deeper than people think? Because he does have a pretty good chin here. He does seem like he can certainly take a punch. We know that, and he can deliver. Or do you think there's going to be a quick night for one of these 2 heavyweights?
Yeah, it's shocking to say that when you get low-level heavyweights, you think the over is in play. But I think it is. I think that these 2 guys are both hard-headed. Sure, they are knockout artists, but I would look to for the fight to go to the over. I think certainly in play then would be Chase Sherman. You see there plus 330. that's brilliant if you're going to take that. So, yeah, I definitely think, and it's probably also has to do with the fact that neither of these guys are tremendously athletic and tremendously have a large arsenal of striking at their disposal. So, Rock'em Sock'em Robots likely fight, entertaining fight, maybe fight of the night. I like Chase Sherman, and likely Chase Sherman via decision.
Oh, and possibly the fight of the night. I like that as well. So, again, we talked to Lou Finocchiaro in the last segment. He likes a lot of overs in this one. Jordan likes the over in that one as well, although you got to juice it a little bit, minus 170 for that fight to go over 2.5 rounds. Okay, let's get to the other fight that I think most people are expecting this fight to go to the decision. That's to the ladies we go. And Katlyn Chookagian against Jennifer Maia. Very close the first time these two ladies fought. And now we got the rematch in this one here. So, Jordan, how do you handicap this one? Do you think it's different the second time around or another close fight? And most people expecting right now Chookagian at minus 180 to get her arm raised in victory again.
I think it's shocking that everybody that is analyzing this fight had to be reminded that they fought like 2 years ago. I mean, it's crazy to think about, but it is. And I think it's going to be the same exact result. Katlyn Chookagian is a well-rounded volume kickboxer with a good ground game. She's got length. She's got height. Jennifer Maia is going to have to dirty this fight up. She's going to have to press Chookagian against the cage, rough her up a little bit, and get to the clinch. And I just don't think that she has the skill set to do that. Katlyn Chookagian is a smart fighter. That's why she's gone to decision in each one of her victories. I think she's going to do it again against Jennifer Maia. I would handicap her more of like a 220, 230 favorite over Jennifer Maia, because I just don't see a way that Maia's going to win this fight handily. So Katlyn Chookagian at $1.80, tremendous value in my opinion. I think it's the same result. Take the over, you take her via decision, and she gets her hand raised tomorrow night.
And to your point there, Jordan, minus 125 for Chookagian to win by decision, right? So even though it's not that big a number at minus 180, do you like that value at minus 125, knowing that that's the way Katlyn wins, right? She wins in the scorecard. She goes the distance. And at minus 125, even extra better value, do you like that play or just take the safer? She's going to win.
That's the trend. Dave, that's the trend. Like, Katlyn Chookagian is going to make history. Like, I think she's going to become the first fighter to get 10 wins and all of them via decision, no finishes. So, and Jennifer Maia is a tough out. Like, don't get me wrong. Like, she's a good fighter. She fought for the title and deserves to be in this high profile fight. But it's just everything that Jennifer Maia is going to bring, Katlyn Chookagian has seen, and her skill set is just too much for her to handle. So yeah, Chookagian via decision is the rightful play. But if you're worried about that, you think Chookagian's going to defy the odds to get the finish, fine. Then just lay $1.80 for her to get her hand raised.
Yeah, I think I'm right there with you. That if I'm playing that, I'm going to play the side of minus 125 that she gets that win via decision. All right, let's get to the main event, Jordan. And look, I'm pretty pumped up for this one. Obviously, when you have Giga Chikadze back into the octagon, and it's been a while since we've seen Calvin Kattar back in there, as he's been out of the action for almost a year now. I don't know if people have forgotten who Calvin Kattar is, but we know this is at least a top 10, if not top 5 guy in this division. But you look in the 145-pound division here, and then you look at Chikadze, and he feels like the fast riser here. And I guess that's why you can understand he's a minus 235 favorite. Is that rightly priced or maybe a little bit too high priced?
I actually think it might be a little bit too low. I mean, look, I have to be reminded that Calvin Kattar headlined the first fight card of last year. I mean, and it was that long ago that we saw him just get obliterated for 5 rounds against Max Holloway. Calvin Kattar is a fantastic fighter. He certainly is. But look, 3 of the last 4 fights of his have gone to decision. He's a good boxer, and he's not going to bring to the table what we need to see Chikadze go up against. And that's a good grappler that's going to look to take the fight to the ground. This is going to be a stand-up fight. That's Chikadze's wheelhouse. He's won 7 fights in a row. 3 of them have been brilliant finishes. The last one over Edson Barboza. This is definitely the highest profile fight for Chikadze and the best fighter that he's fought. But I would have rather seen a grappler. I would have rather seen a guy that has that in their arsenal. Now, maybe Kattar worked on it during his downtime. The recovery of that fight that he took, the most amount of strikes that he took against Max Holloway, you couple that with his skill set, which is not a ground specialist. Chikadze all day for me. I think he's tough enough to probably go to the judge's scorecard. So I don't know if I'm going to necessarily be confident in the finish. but Chikadze's going to win this fight, win it all day.
Okay, I think you just touched on something that's very important to discuss, and that is Calvin Kattar to find different ways to try to win this. Because to your point, if he stays at distance with Chikadze, those Giga kicks are coming. We know it, and we don't know where they're going to come from, but they're going to come. And Calvin Kattar can wrestle. He hasn't shown that a lot, certainly in the UFC. He's been known, as you mentioned, power striker, right? Throw those elbows like he got Jeremy Stevens, a little heathen out with, and certainly Ricardo Lamas broke his jaw with that right hand. Can he switch it up, Jordan? Can he try to take this fight down to the ground and see if he can grind out? And obviously that would lead to the over. And we know right now it is juiced heavily to the over at -175. Or do you see this fight just staying on the feet?
Yeah, well, look, yeah, I mean, I truly believe that if Chikadze was in there, sorry, my son is going crazy. Chikadze, if he was in there with somebody that's going to look to take the fight to the ground, he's going to struggle. Kattar, he was a high school wrestler. He might look to do that, but in a similar fashion where, like Brandon Royval, his storyline going in the Rogerio Borderon fight is like, I've changed. I'm not going to be that crazy wild man fighter. You could say that, and Kattar could say, look, I've worked on grappling. I'm going to be a grappler. At the end of the day, he's not. He's a boxer. He's comfortable on his feet. So, no, I don't think it happens. I think it stays on the feet. And again, that's Chikadze's wheelhouse, and that's where he's going to get the victory. Again, I believe that Kattar's strong enough to last those 5 rounds against Chikadze.
Okay, so you clearly like the over then at 2.5 rounds, which is juice -175. Even Lou Finocchiaro said that's still decent value. I know most people shy away from that when they look at that juice. But again, for this fight to go the distance, right now it's +130. Is there value there, Jordan, in your eyes that, yeah, okay, Kattar's not going to win, but he's tough enough to go all 5. Do you think that might be a plus scenario that you like in this one?
Yeah, just two of the things that I think I alluded to. 3 of the last 4 fights for Kattar have gone to decision. So, and look at that last fight. I mean, Max Holloway certainly isn't known as a KO artist, but the amount of strikes that he put on Calvin Kattar over 5 rounds, I think set the record, at least set the record for the featherweight division. So even though Chikadze has won 3 fights in a row, 3 of them, or 7 in a row, 3 of them impressive finishes, I think just Kattar's he's got that Boston strong, type of dude. I know it's hard, but at the end of the day, that's what I'm going to believe in. And so Kattar, I think, lasts long enough and gets it to the judges' scorecards, but he's going to lose them.
All right, and Jordan, by the way, it's okay for your son to get excited because we're excited for this main event as well between Chikadze and
I feel like it was that viral video. Remember one when that baby came in? I'm no like diplomat or senator, whoever it was, but like, yeah, my son shirtless coming in and having some fun on VSiN.
It happens. Hey, let's talk about Brandon Royval because you mentioned this. He's going to switch up his style in this fight against Rogerio Bontorin. What do you make of Royval? He's a small favorite, and this one about -160 we're seeing right now. The different style, does that scare you off, or do you think we'll still see Brandon Royval get wild as he normally does inside that octagon?
I mean, selfishly, I kind of hope he gets wild because that makes him such an entertaining fighter. Sure, I mean, that's the storyline. He said he's going to be more reserved. And if he's more reserved, he is 100% a title contender because I love his game. He's got a good chin. He's got good stand-up. He's got wild submissions. He's got great cardio. And he came in with a lot of hype from his days at LFA. And look, I think he was winning the Brandon Moreno fight until he had shoulder separation to put him out. But I stay away from this fight. Borderon's also a wild card. He was winning that Kai Kara-France fight until he got knocked out in that first round. I stay away and just watch this fight and enjoy it.
Follow him on Twitter at Woodon1063. Jordan Sherwood, always appreciate the time and the information. When we come back, Reed Kuhn's going to join us right here on First Strike on VSiN, the Sports Betting Network. DraftKings Sportsbook is giving you plenty of ways to bet the UFC. Just download the DraftKings Sportsbook app, and you're going to be able to bet on more than just the main event. DraftKings has great odds on fight lines, total rounds, and futures for MMA events. Eligible restrictions to apply. See DraftKings.com/sportsbook for full terms and conditions. Dave Ross back here, First Strike on VSiN. Always a pleasure to be joined by Reed Kuhn. And Reed, you're the last person that I can say Happy New Year to you as we welcome you back to begin our coverage of the UFC here in 2022 with what looks like a pretty good card on paper. But, you know, you look at the main event, and obviously that's what's going to get all the attention with Giga Chikadze against Calvin Kattar in this one. When you look at the card as a whole, do you go, all right, let's kind of tiptoe our way back into the 2022 waters? We know we've got UFC 270 next week. Or is this one of those cards where you go, yeah, there's some good value that I actually like that your models see?
It's tricky. I'm itching to get back in the seat and see some good matchups, see some good betting plays. I'm just not seeing it this week. I think dipping our toe back in the water, yeah, that's one way of looking at it. Another is just this is the reality of a COVID surge. We're going to see cancellations. We're going to see last-minute switch-ups. I will credit, I have seen a lot of movements with fighters coming in on short notice and picking up the slack. So kudos to the matchmakers. I know they are working overtime right now, already working overtime for next weekend as well. But that doesn't leave me in a good spot when we're switching people last minute. I'm trying to rerun the numbers. And sometimes also a matchup falls out. We had two viable fighters facing each other, and now we got a new guy coming in on short notice. All of a sudden, that's a pass. So this is one of those weeks where when I looked at this a few weeks ago, I saw huge bets that I was going to be making, and all of them got canceled. So I'm left with a few small plays, tentative, but that doesn't mean I'm not going to be watching for sure because that main event is going to be fire.
Hey, absolutely right, Reed. And again, follow him on Twitter as I do at Fightnomics. But to your point there, the models don't like it when you have the replacements last minute come in, and really it's hard to gauge because of the uncertainty of the unknown fighters, what type of fight camps have they had, all of those things. It's going to be hard to factor in. But we do know, as you mentioned, with the main event, when we have Calvin Kattar against Giga Chikadze, this does feel like a firefight here. We obviously have seen where it's been juiced to the over. A lot of people think this fight's going to go deep into the Vegas night here, over 2.5. But right now, Kattar is a sizable underdog in this one. He hasn't fought in about a year since he lost to Max Holloway. What are the models showing you with Kattar against Giga?
Yeah, both guys show up really strong in striking categories. That's not, a surprise to anyone. They rarely take takedown attempts. They don't spend a whole lot of time on the ground, at least voluntarily. So we don't really expect an all-over fight. We expect these guys to stand across from each other, and it's going to be a striking duel. What's interesting is that even though they both look strong on paper, they look strong for very different reasons. Chikadze is the power striker. He is throwing a lot of kicks. He's mixing it up, and he's swinging for the fences with his punches, not a lot of jabs. Whereas you have the flip side with Kattar. He is working that jab game. Normally, he's a rangy guy. It actually won't be the case in this fight. He's actually going to be the less rangy fighter. But Kattar is definitely going to work on that jab game. And he likes to control the distance and really control the pace. I don't think he's going to be able to do that. Chikadze is an aggressive striker. Now, both men, I think, when it comes to the defense, unfortunately, we have deflated stats for Kattar. His last fight against Max Holloway was a lopsided drubbing, record-setting, perhaps, in terms of how many punches were landed. Unfortunately, I think that is deflating what I'm seeing on paper. It's making it look like he has bad head strike defense. I'm not sure if that's going to be true against anybody other than Max Holloway. We'll see. It gives me an opportunity to say, yes, I do see a pathway for Giga Chikadze to maybe even get a finish because he hits harder than Max Holloway, and he has more kicking strikes. So I do see a path to victory. The model comes out basically where the odds are. We agree with Chikadze as the favorite. Not enough buffer, though, for me to want to lay money on top of that juice. But here I am. I'm wondering how deflated are these numbers because of the Max Holloway fight? Because 5 rounds is a lot of volume, a lot of time, and it's the most recent fight we have to look at a year ago for Kattar. So that gives me a little bit of pause. If anything, Kattar fighting anybody else, it's surprising to see him in this spot as such a big underdog. So I am taking pause here. I'm probably going to pass on this altogether. I lean Chikadze as the winner. I think he's more likely to get a finish. That would be interesting to me. But if it goes 5 rounds, you can't count Kattar out for being a smart, distance-controlled fighter.
Yeah, it's interesting because we had Lou Finocchiaro on earlier in the program, Reed. He kind of likes exactly what you're saying, that maybe Chikadze could get this done late, which I don't know that a lot of people are seeing that. Very quickly in the models, because I'm always fascinated by that. You can't throw out one fight, obviously, right? But when one fight, to your point about the Max Holloway fight against Calvin Kattar, kind of skews it so much because he got so dominated and it was so lopsided and the fight did go that long. Is there a way to quantify that, or is that as, hey, the numbers are the numbers and you can't take that fight out? Obviously, it was his last fight. It's been over a year. Is it just tough to factor in because it was so one-sided in defeat?
There are some techniques like backdating or predating the models and trying to ignore what happened. It gets a little tricky and messy. I also try not to mess with a good thing, to be honest. Like, it's working for me, so I'm not going to mess with it. But you're right. But it's one of those qualitative things that comes to mind as I'm trying to decide my strategy for a card. So this is one of those main events. I'm definitely going to be on the edge of my seat for it. I'm just not going to be as invested as usual.
Yeah, very smart. And again, that's why the numbers never lie. And your numbers are up there as the very best in the business. Let's talk about Katlyn Chookagian against Jennifer Maia in this one. So for fight fans that watch this fight the first time, I think they're expecting a lot of the same. That Katlyn Chookagian, who wins by decision, that's what she does, will do that again against Jennifer Maia. What are the numbers and the models showing you?
Yeah, in terms of performance, we do see advantages for Chookagian. But it's the size. It's a huge size discrepancy. And sometimes you forget it. Like, I see it on paper. I see like a number for how tall someone is, 69 inches versus 64. But then you see them go in the cage and you're like, whoa, one fighter is just towering over the other one with a massive reach advantage. And it really does affect the dynamic of the fight sometimes when we see that big of a differential. Because on the numbers, some of the performance metrics are actually identical. Like, they use similar pace and aggression. I wouldn't say one of them has a huge advantage over the other in terms of the skill set, but when you factor in the size difference, it means that Jennifer Maia is swimming uphill. Now, based on the current lines, Chookagian is not a huge favorite. She is a mild favorite, and I agree with that. I think if the price were to diverge any more, I would maybe take a small play on Maia. But really, I expect her to put up more of a fight this time. She's probably going to take the distance. I think if anything I'm taking out of this bet, it's probably over 2.5 or goes the distance as a parlay anchor for other bets, because I do expect this to be competitive because the numbers are coming out so even, but they are still leaning Chookagian. It's just not worth the price.
Yeah, and again, the fight to go to the distance there is minus 360, but at least it's not as bad as being juiced to the over. Minus 400 for 2.5. So if you think it can go the extra 2.5 minutes there in that third and final round, better value at minus 360. Let's talk about the co-main event here, and we're getting some split opinions here from our experts on First Strike. When you look at Jay Collier against Chase Sherman, and this one, Chase Sherman, the small dog here in the heavyweight bout. And again, this one's juiced to the over, so I think they're thinking, even though these are big guys with one-punch knockout power, this one more than likely will go longer into the night. What are the models showing you, and is Chase Sherman a live small dog here?
Well, it's an interesting point. These are heavyweights, and so, of course, you're thinking, all right, is there going to be an early knockout? They always have that potential. On paper, though, these guys actually both come in slightly below average in their knockdown rate. So these are not the one-punch knockout killers of the heavyweight division. These guys are a little busier. That's interesting. Both guys tend to be busy. I would say that Chase Sherman's, his defense is a liability. He's been knocked down 3 times, and his head strike defense is probably the worst of anyone on this card. Now, that said, Jake Collier is not exactly pinpoint accurate. He has the lesser of the accuracies of these two fighters. So it is kind of back and forth. Now, overall, I do see more advantages for Jake Collier. So again, I agree with the favorite here, but also not enough to make a big bet on it. I'm probably not going to see this go to the ground. Collier does have some ground stats, but Sherman has never taken the fight there. So I do expect these guys will kind of take a slow pace at each other. And yeah, I think as heavyweights go, this is one of the ones that's more likely to go on the over.
Got about a minute to go here with Reed Kuhn. Follow him on Twitter at Fightnomics. Let's get to Brandon Royval against Bontorin here. And Royval, we talked about this, says he's going to switch up his style in this one. What are the models like in his old style? Did they like the old Royval, and maybe will they like the new one even better?
Yeah, this one's interesting. I think unlike some of the other fights, I actually do agree with the favorite, and I think there's maybe a little bit of value. So I might be taking a play on Brandon Royval here. He is very busy pace here. Aggressive fighter, tends to really outpoint his opponents in terms of volume, whereas Bontorin is more reserved. Both guys actually have poor head strike defense, so they could be teeing off on each other, but at this weight class, less of a concern. So I'm actually backing Royval. And by the way, if we're looking for an upset pick on the undercard, look at Charles Rosa over TJ Brown. We could be surprised on the ground.
Okay, and by the way, Reed Kuhn's going to join us next week right here in studio at First Strike in Las Vegas. Safe travels. Thanks everybody for joining us here on First Strike on VSiN, the Sports Betting Network.